everybody. Welcome to Mary Wieden You, and it's Friday, and what a frightening night it was. I was kind of just sleeping away, and my dog came, and she didn't bark at me. I guess she knew not to bark at me because it wasn't dire, but she whimpered enough to where I could hear her, and I woke up, and I could see lightning through the blinds, and then she's very sensitive to storms. Not scared, but she's sensitive. And so I got up and took her outside, and the lightning was unbelievable, and it was just hardly starting to rain, and then it just whoosh. I mean, it just came down in buckets, and then after a while, I thought somebody was breaking into my house because I could hear this banging on the glass.
Yes.
It was hail. It was hail, right?
Yeah, it
so
was. I left my windows down, and at midnight, I hear something it sounds like it's breaking into the window.
Yes.
My dogs are sound asleep, and I wake up. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh, my God, I left my windows down. And I run out there half dressed.
In your car? You left them down?
Yeah, and so I run out the door half dressed thinking it's just raining, and I'm getting pelted by marbles. I mean, they were big.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, marble-sized hail. It was crushing me.
Really?
So I ran back inside and threw on a jacket and stuff, and by the time I got out there and rolled the windows up, it stopped. I mean, it was so I had a bucket of water in the car, and so I had to clean
Do you have
it.
damage on your car, on the body of the car?
It was so dark when I left.
Well, you still have it.
I'll look when I get out there today, I guess,
Well, that's right. You still come to work in the dark. That other voice you heard is Dr. Glenn Antizzo. He's here from MC. We're going to talk about some stuff, world stuff. I just want to bring you up to date on a couple things. First of all, apparently the semi-wreck on I-20, I gather westbound at near the 54, as they call it, in Brandon, exit 54, is still ongoing, and you're going to have to take a slower way through there. You can go one lane, I think, and as the local people, they'll say, find another route. Well, it's up to you to tell them. The other route would be Highway 80 if you have to do that. Get off at the 56 and go around and then get up there, and when you can get back down. But a semi wrecked in the early hours of the morning, and it looked like, from what I saw on TV, like he was in one direction and crossed over into another direction. And it made me think of this report that I heard this week somewhere about 18-wheeler wrecks. Companies are hiring people who don't speak English to drive the 18-wheelers. They don't know road signs. They don't know anything. Now, what kind of stuff is going on in this country that we have to have that? Let's get Sean Duffy on it. I mean, really, that's disgusting. Come on, don't be so whatever you are that you hire these people. And I don't know that that's what this person's problem was, if it was a man or woman. I don't know what their problem was, and I don't know the company or anything like that. It's still all, kind of up in the fog up there. But that's disgusting, and I wonder if anybody keeps track of that stuff, even in Mississippi. Like, how many accidents with 18-wheelers do we have with people who can't speak English, for heaven's sakes? Anyhow, so that's ongoing. Take it easy through there. It's the Brandon area. It's near exit 54. The other thing is the air care crash that happened on the 10th of March. Just a little bit of a preliminary report out today on that. It still doesn't tell you the cause of the crash, though. That's just it. But it kind of reiterated things that you already knew, that the helicopter was inspected 2.5 hours before it took off for flight on that day. And what they usually do is a pilot will walk around the helicopter and just look and see that everything looks okay. And if he needs to touch anything, he'll touch whatever. I've never seen one climb up and touch what's called the Jesus nut. That's the one where it holds the rotor on, and then you pray to Jesus that it stays there. That's why it's called that. Yes, I did that when we did a auto rotation where they take you up. It's an exercise they have to do, not if you have a passenger, but just have to do. And they go up whatever altitude, cut the engine, and then the helicopter, the rotor, the rotors are going around, and that's what's keeping you alive from crashing way down. And they do that. And I don't know how far we fell. I don't know. I don't know how high we were, because I didn't want to ask, because I was praying that you pray to Jesus at the nut holes, and that's truly why that's called that. Anyway, everything was fine with us, but I don't know what happened there. Obviously, they just have no idea, other than the pilot did radio that they were having trouble, and they were going to land in a field, and it was out near Turcotte, which is off of Highway 43 in Rankin County, and they were coming in on a 40 to 45 degree angle, and then all of a sudden they hit maybe some trees, and that ended the flight, obviously, brought it down, and then it burst into flames. So don't know, but I know if you hit anything, you touch anything with those rotors, and you're gone. Sadly, that's the way they are. But anyway, so the actual full report won't be out for another year or two on that one.
Did you see? I don't know if this is the same thing you're talking about, but did you see what happened in New York?
Yes,
yesterday?
I did, and I think the Jesus nut was. I think that thing flew off, because I heard two people one guy used to be used to be with the FAA, and then somebody else was talking about how there weren't any rotors.
Yeah, no, the
way they come off.
The video footage was just
scary.
Yeah, seeing that thing flying like that and kaplunk into the rotor.
When the rotors are gone, you're nothing.
I've never seen anything like that, Mary. And I know you've been up in so many times in a helicopter, and then the auto rotate, the drop, and all that. But watching that helicopter drop like that,
terrible. Just boom.
I mean, it was faster than a rock. I mean, it just went straight down.
Go ahead, Alonzo.
No, it blew my mind. I've never seen something like that.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely chilling video to see, and I'm getting to the point where I don't want to take any means of transportation where I am not controlling what's going on. I don't want to go on a cruise. I'm not. I know that occasionally I got to take a plane until they build that causeway out to Puerto Rico, but If I'm going to die in a transportation accident, I'd rather it be by my own hand in a sense than be at the mercy of somebody else.
Wow, I didn't know you felt that way.
You've been up in the chopper so much, and I was listening to several experts out there that build helicopters and things like that. We don't even go up in them. We may build them, but we don't.
Which ones? They're not talking about like Sikorsky's. This was the Bell.
Right,
the Bells are wonderful helicopters.
Well, and I'd heard several commentary of people that are actually engineers and build them and work on them. They're like, we're not going up in a helicopter, and we work on them.
The most important thing in a helicopter is maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to maintain those things all the time. I will never understand how we've had helicopters over in the Middle East and sand deserts and stuff like that, because you get sand in there. It seems to me like they have to come in after every flight, but they are somehow, some of those big ones are able to, like the big, let me see, Chinooks, they can handle some of that stuff, but gee.
Go ahead. I was just saying, somebody reported earlier that it was the 6th or 7th trip that helicopter had made during the day yesterday.
Yeah. It could be that the nut got loose. Like I said, I've never seen anybody. I've seen the guys walking around the helicopter, just my little helicopter, our little skycopter, but I never saw anybody climb up and, touch that. I just never have. I think that's probably maintenance people, what they do. But, they go all around before a flight, check and make sure everything looks good, before you get a bug. So we're going to say.
And that's, actually, two things. Number one is you were talking before about the sand in the desert.
Yes.
That's why that's a large part of the reason why we had to scrub the rescue mission for the hostages that Iran was holding in April of 1980, because there was a sandstorm and the helicopters were flying through it on their way to Desert One, the base they were going to use, and one of the helicopters had to turn back, and another helicopter was disabled. And so, we thought we had a good chance to rescue the hostages, and we had to cancel it because we didn't have enough helicopters to actually carry out the mission. And no, the inspection thing, you are absolutely right. And that is part of the reason why I'm a little nervous. In principle, I'm not afraid of flying. But, when you are cutting back, you're an airline or, a helicopter company and you're looking to cut back, everybody thinks the most expensive thing that an airline does is the fuel. But I think probably if you were to look, it's the maintenance.
Yep.
And so you're tempted to cut back on that. And that's why you end up with things, do you remember back when I was in college, there was an episode at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., where an Air Florida plane did not have its wings sufficiently de-iced, and the plane ended up crashing into the Potomac River.
Oh, that was the one where Lenny Skutnik, how do I remember this name? A guy named Lenny Skutnik from Mississippi dove in the water and saved somebody. But I never knew what it was, what caused it or anything like that.
Evidently what happens is there's water vapor that is around the plane, and when the plane gets to a certain altitude, the vapor freezes, and it weighs down the plane, and that's what caused the crash.
Oh, man. That's terrible stuff. Terrible, terrible stuff. Now let's talk about some other terrible stuff. Let's talk about China and the Houthis and Ukraine. First of all, the China, I'm tempted to send back everything that I own from China to China, but then my house would be empty, and it would cost too much to send it back. But do you want to address that part of things? Are you into, the whole business of the war we're having with China, the tariff war?
Yeah, well, to the extent I can, a lot of this stuff has been really tough to follow. The president is moving at lightning speed
he does.
on a lot of this stuff, so it's hard to keep track of it all.
I think that's why we get messed up with time, because it goes so fast, boom,
Right.
boom, boom, boom. It's already it's Palm Sunday weekend. What? And boy, he just got sworn in, all that stuff. But anyway.
Well, if you look at the trade that we engage in, many countries in the world have an advantage over us in the sense that we are paying a lot more, or they, to send our goods to them. They are importing less, and they are charging us more.
I take my can of beans that I had for some part of this. It was all about why gas prices go up. The can of beans that goes from growing to the silo to the da-da-da-da-da. Well, take that same can of beans, and now that it's finished, it'll cost us, take that can, it'll cost us maybe $1.50 to send it someplace, but they'll only pay us 50 cents or less to send a can of their beans over here. Why should we pay more? I get that.
Now, the reason countries have tariffs is they want to protect their own industries. And in our case, we're hoping to not just protect the industries we have, but maybe revive them, have them come back. Because the only cost pretty much that a business can control is the cost of the labor. And so, obviously, for example, your clothing is often produced overseas. You may remember Kathy Lee Gifford a number of years ago had a clothing line with Kmart, and it turned out that she kids were making these things down in like Honduras and for
peanuts,
exactly, then that was allowing you to buy a blouse for $10 over at Kmart. So obviously, what you want to do is you want to have a tariff to protect your industries. But in our case, again, a lot of things we've offshored a lot of stuff. For example, when I call customer service, I never get somebody in the United States. They have call centers in India. They got call centers in the Philippines.
Is a big one.
Right. And the Philippines, I get that. It used to be part of the United States until 1946. It was an American Commonwealth, and they are familiar with the language. They're familiar with the culture, and so I get that. But it doesn't make it easy for Americans.
For Americans, you know what though? When they start where I can't understand them, I say, because you're like what, say what, and so I say, like you, English is not my first language either. I'm from Germany. Well, I lived over there. I'm an American person, but anyway, whatever you say, I have to translate into German and back into English before I can speak to you. Do you understand that? So that slows them down. I mean, that is not exactly true.
Right.
I mean, German is not my first language, but it works for a situation like that. But anyway, it's very annoying.
So anyway, what the administration is trying to do is level the playing field by, in an effort to help out American industry by saying, okay, if you're going to charge a certain amount in tariffs, we will match that amount, reciprocal tariffs. However, I think it's partially to try to get business back here, but also partially just to level the playing field and see if we can't get tariffs down.
I understand, but you know what you're talking about, the making of the Kathy Lee stuff and whatever. Don't you think that in a way we're to blame? We Americans, like, why should we pay $50 for a T-shirt when we can get one for $20? Someplace else. Surely we can find something better than that. So we have enabled all of the products made over there, and that's terrible. I think aren't Nikes made by Uyghurs?
In China,
stuff like that.
Stuff that's
like
why
that. But we don't object to that. We don't, because if you make those Nikes over here, you're going to pay all the labor costs that you got to pay, and you just have to hope that your salary goes up with commensurate with everything else going on.
Yeah, no,
pay for that.
You're paying what, $200 to $250 for a pair of LeBron James Nikes that are being made for pennies on the dollar over in China. No, you're absolutely right.
I see that. I see that's the only thing that I sort of partially blame us, because we're lulled by all that.
Pharmaceuticals are the same way. We pay the highest price on the planet for something that we generally had rights to, but the rest of the world can't afford that, so we got to subsidize it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and just getting back to the drugs, we're the ones who do the research and development to get these drugs, and that costs money because it's a trial and error process, and then the Chinese get to make money when the generics come out.
Well, and I would venture to guess that they probably do that long before the generics actually are legally able to be sold.
Lance, it's so funny you should say that. I was in Auburn, Alabama about 20 years ago, and there was a movie. I was passing a kid who was sitting in the hallway of the hotel I was staying at, and he was watching a movie with Chinese subtitles at the bottom, and the movie wasn't going to hit the theaters for like 2 more weeks.
Yeah, that was called Pirate Bay Browser. They finally did away with that, but yes, it was a situation that existed where people would just, they could get anything a month, 2 months ahead of you. You're like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine turned me on to that, which was highly illegal.
How'd you get
you
that?
had to do it through like a different type of server, a Tor server. But yeah, you could get anything months, and it all came out of China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of intellectual property theft, and
and the balloons. This is the thing that kills me. Those balloons that were flying around. Duh. What were the balloons? Well, they were Chinese people spying on us. Yeah. Oh no, they were weather balloons. Come on, we're not that stupid. And they were. I mean, they just blatantly. But yet on the other hand, Trump goes around saying, and I was watching him for a while yesterday. It was quite interesting. I just fell into this. The whole cabinet was there giving their updated reports. It was pretty fascinating. And what was I?
It was impressive though, seeing all that. Seeing the whole cabinet.
Oh, I know. And he was saying something like, Xi Jinping is a friend of mine. Okay, well, let's.
Well, you can be tough love on friends. Sometimes you got to exhibit it.
We're paying 125%. No. We're paying 125. Now we're charging them 145%, something crazy like that.
Right.
But I mean, if it comes to an end, if they're at the same, why don't you just go zero?
Well,
if you're not making anything, it's zero.
You may end up getting a good deal out of this, but you've got two guys who have strong personalities, who neither one wants to be perceived as having lost this. So while a lot of our friends, from Europe, Australia, and others, they were angry with us at first for raising the tariffs, but they are coming to the negotiating table, and we're probably going to end up cutting deals with these folks that'll be mutually beneficial. The Chinese are not budging on this, and I don't think that President Xi wants to lose face on this and look like a weak leader, especially since he apparently is aspiring to sort of reorient the world order towards himself.
Yes.
Right now, the hegemonic power, and I don't mean hegemon in a negative way, but the leading power is the United States. They are lusting after that role.
Absolutely. Well said. We'll take our first break. Didn't that time go by fast? Speaking of time flying by, we'll be back in a few minutes here on Mary Wieden You. Stay where you are. Dr. Glenn Antizzo from MC, and you can call him up if you'd like at 888-808-8637. But better yet, most people they're just so ingrained into doing texting 601-879-4395, 879-4395, and you can watch us supertalk.fm/Mary, so you can see at least what we look like. Hi. Anyway, so we were final thoughts on China before we.
Well, again, I think neither one are going to want to budge on this. Trump wants this deal. Xi does not want to lose face. Because I think he's got aspirations for China to replace the United States as the dominant world power.
Well, you got about almost $1 trillion worth of bonds that China is holding of our money.
Right.
Ooh.
Yeah, no,
that's another
700 billion
factoid
in the range. So yeah,
Lance is right.
Bond markets are what you pay attention to in this world.
A lot of the deficit spending that we are engaging in is being financed by the Chinese buying these bonds. But at the same time, the Chinese need access to this market.
Oh gosh, we're the biggest, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the safest too. Yeah.
Yeah, I at the risk of sort of drawing a stereotype here, I mean, do you remember 30, 40 years ago when Walmart's big pitch was, we're the place to buy American?
Oh, I thought that was more recent. I know what you're talking about. About 20 years ago. All American.
It was before we hit the China first policy. That's all you could buy in there was American.
Right. And now basically outside of the food section, basically all you can buy is Chinese or foreign stuff in Walmart, it seems like, when you go in there. And to be honest with you, even some American companies in the agriculture sector are Chinese owned. Like, for example, it's my understanding that Smithfield. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this.
Largest pork producer in the United States is owned by China.
Really?
They bought that a decade ago.
Yeah.
And how about tractors? Some of those tractors, are they Chinese made?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
The biggest problem I have is like Andy Gibson. You cannot allow foreign governments to control your food supply.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Ooh, I didn't hear him say that. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, no,
he said that about he is adamant on that one.
Well, I can see that. I would. Yes, I would expect that, and he's right.
Yeah.
And they're buying up. But here's the thing: they're buying up land, right, Lance? They're buying up land. Well, who's selling it to them? Greedy Americans who want the money. So how do you teach greedy Americans who want the money? Look, take a little bit less and take care of your own people. This is the thing that gets me. And we're, like I said, we're the ones too who want cheaper things. We want to pay less. We want to pay less for stuff that we wear and shoes, all this kind of stuff. And these people, are selling their land. Well, I just want to get as much money as I can for my land. I want to get as much money as I can for my house or whatever. So there. I mean, there is that factor.
Nothing to argue with on that, right? Yeah. I mean, and the other side is they're bringing huge amounts of money to the table that a lot of folks can't afford to go out and play and put down for the same thing. So they're running the prices up on farmland, and it makes Americans who would buy that land and be productive incapable because you can't compete with Godzilla when you're a lizard.
When you're an Anatoly. So also, people are selling land. There's some up by Camp Grayling in Michigan. Camp Grayling is like Camp Shelby here. It's a big military place. It's up. Right. It's up. Mid-north Michigan like this. So they sell this farmland next to. Well, it's the people again. It's like, why do we have to be so greedy?
Well, and also, I know Dr. Antizzo knows this as well, that, the Chinese have been not only buying up farmland, but they've been buying up lots of raw and vacant land around U.S. military bases.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Camp Grayling, for instance.
And there's many of those. Yeah. I need to do more research on how many, but apparently it's a lot of them.
Yeah. Find out if we got them. Find out if they're selling in near Camp Shelby. We need to find that out. I don't know if there's much land available on the Gulf Coast.
Well, again, the big investment portfolios love timber. Love timber, and that's what you're going to find all around Camp Shelby. Timber.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole, absolutely, yeah. Check that one out, Lance. Really. Anyway, so go ahead. We got to finish China because we got to go to some other stuff.
Actually, I was going to pivot from China to Ukraine.
Oh, yes.
On the battlefield in Ukraine, at least 2 Chinese nationals have been captured by Ukrainian forces, and the Ukrainians claim that that their intelligence have been tracking 150 Chinese nationals. Now, the question is, are these people being sent over as a matter of government policy, or are these people mercenaries? Oh. And it's unclear at the moment. Even the Ukrainians say that they're not aware of what it is. I would not be the least bit surprised if the Chinese government is, in fact, getting involved here.
Oh, yes.
And it's a sign that the Russians are in trouble in Ukraine. They are launching an offensive now in order to take advantage of the situation because they know that Trump really wants a peace agreement there. So they're hoping to get as much as they can to improve their position at the negotiating table. But they've got troops fighting evidently now from China. They've had troops, 10 to 12,000 North Koreans. They've had people from Yemen, Houthis that they've recruited, and former fighters from Syria. They're taking all these people in, and also evidently,
the Chinese would come through the Russians. I mean, supposedly. I mean, China's not going to send directly. Maybe they are.
We don't know. Yeah. But in any case, the Russians are also calling up 160,000 troops, drafting them between the ages of 18 and 30 years of age. They are in trouble. Look, the great thing about this war, if there's any, and I don't mean to say that war is great, but the one good thing is it's exposed the Russians for who they are. They have posed. And they were doing it during the Cold War, but they're doing it now. They're posing as a great power. They're not.
Well, and you keep hearing the saber rattling on their part by a lot of their leaders stating that this isn't what we call total war. This is an operation. This is a military engagement, but this is not total war. If it was total war, we would have wiped them out in 5 minutes. and you're moving the goalposts a bit, right?
Right. And look, you can't. You can't even. You're at war now for 3.5 years against Ukraine, and you still haven't taken more than 20% of their territory. But it also exposed them for the hypocrites they are. They are criticizing Western aid going to Ukraine, and they've got foreign troops on their soil. Or I should say, they got foreign troops on Ukraine's soil. Yeah. And
Russia would like to think that's their soil.
Right.
It used to be, but those days are gone.
I've been, in preparation of seeing you again for the last few weeks, I've really dug into pre-World War I, post-World War I, the interwar period, and WW2, and Russia, Europe, all of the mess that was left in the wake of all of these wars and this who owns what.
Right.
The goalposts change daily almost. Even with Iran, if you look at the border between Russia and Iran, that moved around a lot. And so, it's hard to pin down who actually is entitled to the real estate?
Right.
You know, Russia says it's ours, and Ukraine this and that. I mean, it is a mess. And could you clarify, or do you have an opinion on who really, are the Ukrainians, or who, is it eastern part of the country? Is it the? I mean, what we're looking at? Because it seems like a minestrone mess of who has claim to what.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like after World War I, there was the Russians were supposed to fight to the finish in World War I, but when Lenin took over, he promised peace, bread, and land. And the peace was, we'll make peace with the Germans and the Austrians at any price. And they gave up huge chunks of Russian territory that they grabbed back later during World War II. So you're absolutely right about that. The border shifting back and forth.
But then you said part of did you say this on the air? Was when we were talking off air sometimes that the eastern part of Ukraine is Russian, pretty much.
No, well, I wouldn't say Russian in terms of the traditional territory of Ukraine, but there is a heavy Russian presence there. There are a lot of ethnic Russians that live there. But it's. I hate using a World War II analogy, but here we go.
Okay.
It's like Hitler saying, "Well, the Sudetenland's got a 40% German minority, therefore it should be in the German Reich." And that's what the Munich conference was all about.
Yes.
Just because you have a large minority there, I mean, in that case, if people are making claims of territory based on large minorities, then is Mexico going to reclaim Arizona, New Mexico, and California?
Well, how's Trump going to pull this off? How's he going to say, okay, Zelensky's over here, Putin's over here, I'm here, now let's settle this? How in the world? What does he propose for that? I haven't heard. When he was during the campaign, I can settle this in 3 days before I'm even sworn in. Well, no,
they haven't settled this in 1,000 years.
It's a little exactly. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, what do we do? What does Trump do? Basically, because he's into he's into solutions. Okay, what's your solution, Mr. President?
Well, so far, from my perspective, it looks like that Trump has been taking the Russian side. Now, there may be more to this than meets the eye. To give him the benefit of the doubt for a second, there is a concept called constructive engagement. And obviously, of the two, Russia is the stronger, sort of bigger player on the world stage. So constructive engagement says, say we're at a party and you are, acting in an outrageous way at the party.
Getting drunk and crazy.
Yeah. So, which way are you going to be more likely to get the other person to behave? Is it that, I can't believe that you're humiliating me this way. I invited you to this party, and now you're making a fool of yourself, and you say that in front of everybody and humiliate the guy. Or do you pull him aside and say, hey, look, I'm your friend, and you're really making yourself, and by implication, making me look bad. Please try to get yourself under control. Obviously, the second way, the person's going to be more receptive to it. We have done this in the past with other countries. We did it in the past with China, trying to get China to, stop sending us goods made with slave labor in the past and to improve its human rights policy. But I'm not so sure that is what Trump's up to here. I'd like to think that that's what it is, that he's trying to get the Russians to sort of back off a little bit by talking to them nicely behind the scenes. But he's doing it a little too openly. Look, you are the dominant power here. The United States is the great power. It is to your advantage, if you're Trump, to make it look like you are dictating the terms of peace to Russia. To give in to Russia in a huge way serves no American purpose I can think of, except that, the part of Ukraine that the Russians have been able to take over may have some of those rare earth minerals that Trump wants, and maybe he figures he better be nice to them in order to cut a deal with them.
By the way, I think the way he operates, and nobody sees this, they always say, oh, he's getting cushy with Russia. No, I think Trump's attitude is, and I wish he would say this because I think it's true, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, who's a great enemy but Russia and Putin? That's his arch enemy, I would think. Do you see that, Lance? I see that, but nobody ever. No, the news people. Oh, cushy. But no, there's no love. There's no true love between those two at all.
There may be respect. I think mutually as leaders of huge countries, but at the end, I don't know if there's respect from the standpoint of we share the same values. Right. But mostly from a power perspective, I think he's trying to negotiate and work within that infrastructure of power. But as Dr. Antizzo and you said, I mean, we are the dominant player.
Right.
And you negotiate from positions of strength when you are the dominant player.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now,
Oh, no.
well, let me just say this real quick while the music's playing. The Russians have made a lot of outrageous demands as the price for peace. We can talk about that on the other side, but it's a deal that cannot and should not fly. The United States should definitely, up the ante by perhaps raising tariffs on the Russians in order to.
Interesting. Haven't heard about that
table.
either. Haven't heard one thing about the Russians and that kind of stuff. Okay, because I think we sell to them. I think we sell products to them, and probably we buy stuff. I don't know. We buy from them, but anyway, we'll be back for our. Doggone it! It's our final segment coming right up on Mary Wieden You. Oh man. Let's see. Dr. Glenn Antizzo flying by. Time moves very fast with Trump as president, but it moves really triple fast with you because combine him and you and whoo. That goes by. So you want to do Russia's demands for peace?
Yeah. Before I do that, let me just say real quick.
Yeah.
When I was comparing Mexico and Russia on this, I was not saying that Mexico is like Russia. I just said I was just comparing that. If you were making a claim based on the ethnic composition of people that live on a neighboring country's territory. Mexico doesn't do that to us. Russia shouldn't be doing that to Ukraine.
I gotcha.
In any case, I just wanted to make that clear. But just going back now to Russia. Russia, Trump wants the deal. And Trump has gone fairly easy on the Russians, but the Russians are taking advantage of this, and they're making outrageous demands as the price for peace. And here are some of the demands: that they have international recognition of the land that they've taken over, which is 20% of Ukraine's territory, and I would say probably about 50 to 60% of Ukraine's coastline. Secondly, they want the Ukrainians to disarm. They want the Ukrainians to declare permanent neutrality, no entry into NATO, which would basically mean no security guarantees to protect the sovereignty of the other 80% of the country. They also want the Ukrainians to have for Zelensky to step down, for there to be an international authority, I guess, overseeing Ukrainian government while they hold new Ukrainian elections. It would be a complete surrender of Ukrainian sovereignty and turn Ukraine into little more than a vassal state to the Russians. And it would most definitely, predatory people like Putin sense weakness on the other side and act to take advantage of the weakness. And this would be opening the door to bigger and worse things later. It would be a mistake to let them get away with this. Now, happily, I have seen a number of quotes that indicate that Trump is getting sick and tired of it. As a matter of fact, hang on, I think
I've never heard any of these things.
Trump's patience with Russia appears to be wearing thin. He accused Russia of bombing like crazy now, and he's, quote, not happy with what's going on, unquote. By the way, as part of the early negotiations that Trump was sponsoring, the Russians and the Ukrainians had an agreement that energy infrastructure was not going to be hit. And almost immediately, within about 48 hours, Russian missiles were hitting Ukrainian energy infrastructure. The Russians cannot be trusted on this. And that's why, I know Zelensky, Trump is pissed off at Zelensky. Because he's worried about, getting that rare earth deal. He wants that rare earth deal. And Zelensky wants something a little bit more. Look, it's not enough that I sign this deal with you. You need to give me some sort of security guarantee. And he's sort of dragging his feet on this. Matter of fact, there was word yesterday that Ukraine has rejected Trump's mineral deal, at least in its present form. And Zelensky is not opposed to some sort of a deal, but he's worried that it's going to jeopardize possible EU membership. The deal provides no security guarantees, and so I understand why for Zelensky that's a deal breaker. It would, in my opinion, undermine Ukraine's economic sovereignty to an extent because the proposal includes the creation of a joint investment fund that would grant American control over Ukraine's natural resources to an extent. The current proposal would require Kiev to contribute 50% of revenue derived from state-owned mineral extraction operations to a joint fund that the United States would control.
Sounds like kind of how China works, huh?
Well, but we're better than they are. But by the way, the EU, Trump does not like the EU. Did you hear him the other day? He said the EU is just created to try to knock us off, get the better of us, trying to be better than we are, is what he said. The EU is to combat the United States.
I understand why he's saying that, but let me say this.
But
it's the EU is largely it looks like a government. To an extent, it is. There is a EU Parliament in Brussels. There is
the currency.
Yeah, there's courts. There are laws that apply continent-wide. The idea was to try to facilitate trade in Europe by getting rid of all the border controls. So my understanding is that it's tough to get into the EU, but once you're in there, it's as easy as going from here to Texas. And the only way that you know that you're crossing the border from France into Russia into Germany and Germany into Poland is a sign that says welcome. And the idea also was to bring down, trade barriers between the countries and to have to facilitate trade by having a unified currency. Back when the Italians had the lira, the Germans the Deutschmark, the French the franc, when you made currency exchanges, you would lose money. I'll give you an example just to show you in the American context. A friend of mine from Australia came to visit, and I loaned some money, and I loaned $300, and at the time, I think Australian currency would have been. She would have had to give me $700 Australian dollars to give me back the $300 or whatever it was, and then by the time she paid me back, it was up to $900.
Woo!
So but if you have the euro, you can make currency transfers across national boundaries, and you lose nothing.
And one of the interesting layers of crazy with that is the CFA franc. The French's franc for Africa. Mm-hmm. Do a little digging on. That's the weirdest thing as an offset. They wanted to create their own basic Federal Reserve system only for their colonies and things. And if you look at almost every country in which they've loaned money, the same types of deals that you were mentioning, America's wanting to bestow upon the Ukrainians, basically indebting them to a point where there is no sovereignty.
Right.
That's what France has done to every colony it has, and they're destroyed. There's no value there other than poverty, and basically the land's been just completely mortgaged to the future of. Yeah. So I can see why Zelensky would say, that without security guarantee. France has even given security guarantees, and that hasn't really done much. So, and as you're saying, in terms with the EU, I mean, that's another offset of the EU. It's a whole other type of currency that no one even knows about. But how does that play? And it's very weird. I mean, you do a little work on the Central African franc and all of the different versions of that. It is really, currency's crazy, isn't it?
Way over my head.
I heard some of that this morning on my way in. Lance doing his economic, which was fascinating,
analysis.
By the way. Well, more than analysis. Well, it was. Anyway, but what would be better for Ukraine? The EU or NATO, which they're not going to get into, but EU, would the EU be good for Ukraine?
Yeah, and I think actually the two of them sort of go together.
Okay.
The EU would grant them economic security, and NATO would grant them, political and military security. And, again, if you want to drive Russia to the table, it would seem to me that if you're Trump and you want to play hardball with these guys, you make a deal right now, or I am fast-tracking them in. You like apples? How about them apples?
Well, yeah.
And see what they say about it.
By the way, I wanted to get into this, and there's hardly any time, but this business about all these companies that Trump says are coming to the United States, they want to come so they don't have to pay tariffs, stuff like this. I'm thinking the other day, somebody, did you all have, Lance, did you have, you had, what's her name on? Our
Cindy Hyde-Smith.
Cindy Hyde-Smith.
Yes.
Why didn't you or the host say, hey, what are you doing to get to these companies right now before they get here? Because we got a lot of land in Mississippi. We got international companies here. We've got Toyota. We got Nissan. We got Continental Tires, and a whole lot of land for you people. Get those economic development people into those countries now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not my place in that show, but I can understand where you're coming from on
yes.
that. We do get lots of texts and comments from the line about very similar comments. Yeah.
No know what your place here is. I mean, we've never set. You know. You
Well, I try not to jump in on a
No. That's fine that you do. That's
yeah.
fine that you do. I have no problem with that at all. I guess am I supposed to put it in writing? No.
Yeah, if they were here,
Anyway,
and the host was here, I probably would participate a little more.
Well, but yeah, I would. Don't you think that makes a whole lot of sense? Like, you know, we're in competition with the rest of the world, and we need that kind of stuff in Mississippi. Well, get the hell off your behinds and go find that and get those people to come here. People. Anyway, that's a whole other thing because I wanted to bring it. I wanted to bring some of this stuff that's going on in the world to Mississippi, and it could be done.
Well, I think the.
I hope.
No,
it can be done.
A large part of the reason I'm here in Mississippi is because I see the promise of this place. I really like Mississippi,
yes.
and
it's a diamond in the rough in a whole lot of ways.
If I can steal a line from a former student of mine who ran for Congress a few years back, a lot of people here are Mississippians by birth. I am a Mississippian by choice.
Yes, and I always say by adoption. Yes, I'm here too, and I've lived here longer than I've lived any place else in my life anyway. So what the heck, I ain't from up there anymore. That's for sure. And I ain't going to go back up there to live. And same with you. You ain't from up there anymore.
Nope.
No. And you know who really I just love it. He is so rabidly Mississippi, and I mean this in a good way. Is Douglas Carswell. He was a member of British Parliament and all that kind of stuff, and he is in love with Mississippi, and it's all he thinks about Mississippi growth and development, all that kind of stuff. Send him over there to do some economic development. I think he'd be fabulous at it, wouldn't he? I think that's what Mississippi can be a lot of if more people saw that, Anyway, it didn't used to be that way. It used to be that, when I first came here, there were a lot of people who were pretty well entrenched with this. We ain't done it that way. But now it's like, we can do these things. We can do that, And by the way, you never should say to Donald Trump, that's the way we've always done it. Or, that's the only way that works. No. If you say that, your time is gone. And our time is gone. Well, next time you come back, it'll be a continuation of God knows what we'll be talking about. Thanks an awful lot. And
my pleasure.
We're doing opera, among other things, at least on Tuesday. And it turns out that Die Fledermaus, nicht Die Fledermaus, etwas, the
Magic Flute.
Yeah, the Magic Flute, die Zauberflöte, debuted in Vienna in a suburb called Wieden, Wieden. Never knew this. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.